I always try to just say like there's a testing phase, but then there's a commitment phase of trying new things. So you might try something and say, this isn't for me. Like I don't feel passionate about it. I don't have the time for it. There's a million things. One of my bands, we tried live streaming and they weren't feeling it. They were not feeling it. And I said, that's okay. We can try other pieces of content. But just be really real with yourself about consistency, because I think to your point, that consistency of showing up for your fan base again and again will build your core base online with a new platform.
So, hello everybody, welcome back to another episode. Today we're going to be talking about marketing for the music industry. For me personally, it's a really interesting topic. It kind of straddles the two ends of my career. So, I started life playing guitar for a living, then found digital marketing and absolutely loved that. So, it really does reflect the two things that I've loved the most in my career. So, to talk us through the topic, we've got an amazing guest, Alison Clancy. Welcome to the podcast, Alison.
Thank you so much, John. I was telling you before we started recording that this is my first podcast interview.
Oh,
So I'm so
the honor's
excited.
on me. The honor's on me. Yeah, no, this is cool. So before we dive into the detail, also just want to welcome anyone that's joined the podcast and is listening in for the first time. If you are, hope you enjoy it. Please do subscribe on Spotify or leave us a rating and review on iTunes. Or if you really enjoy it, please do both. That would be amazing. But yeah, genuinely hope you enjoy this one. So, Alison, you run a business that is dedicated to providing marketing services for musicians and artists, right?
Mhm. That's correct. Yes. So, I've been in marketing for the last 10 years or so, but mainly in the technology industry. And then about 2 years ago, I decided to start shifting towards providing services to music companies and also artists. And for me, that means, social media, content creation, and then events. And before, COVID-19, events usually meant a live show or a concert. Now I've definitely had to become an expert at virtual events and live streaming. So that's a new skill for me to have, but one that I think is going to come in handy for quite some time.
Excellent. I'd love to talk a little bit about that in a bit in terms of virtual events and virtual gigs and how that's been working out for people that you work with. Because I think that's just such an interesting shift in an industry that's shifted so much in the last 15 years anyway. And then suddenly there's this new challenge to get around. So you were previously, you've worked for companies like Intuit and worked in the tech space. What made you take the leap to A, working for yourself, which is a big enough leap as it is, but secondly, kind of really kind of niching down into the music sector?
Yeah, it's I love what you said about it's kind of the coming together of two of your favorite things, with marketing and then music. And for me, I come from a musical background. My whole family is made up of artists. So I grew up in a family where, random band members would be like wandering around my living room because my dad was in, five different bands. So that was normal. That was normal for me to have a microphone in my hand and amps and like a bunch of random dudes behind me playing guitar. And, I thought everyone came from that background for a long time. And then I realized that that's not the case. But yeah, music has always been something that is very important to me. I just never saw it demonstrated as something that I could make into a career, or, like a full time career. And as far as my corporate life, I started in tech startups here on the West Coast for a couple years and then graduated into, global corporations. And I kept growing and ascending. I started in social media, online community management, and then graduated into, both online and offline community management. So that's actually what I did at my last role at Intuit, who are the makers of TurboTax and QuickBooks. And
Yeah.
it was fine. I would say I was fine. But I always kind of had this voice inside of me that said, this is okay for now, but you haven't quite found that intersection of like what you're speaking about, of, I think, role versus interest. I love technology. I love how fast it moves. I love that it solves problems for people. So that's always going to be within me. It's just I kind of had this feeling like something else had to be found. And in 2018, I actually attended my first So Far Sounds show here in San Diego, California.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and for the listeners who don't know about So Far Sounds, it's a music events company, and really they put the focus on music. And it actually started in London in 2009, where the founders were going to see a show, and they noticed that all of the patrons of the bar or the restaurant that they were in were just talking over the artist who was playing, and nobody was really paying attention. It was kind of that deal where the musician was kind of just background noise, and they were like, man, that's a bummer. We really wish that people would really focus a little bit more on the art that's right next to them. So they planned a living room concert, and from there it spread into, I think there's 344 chapters worldwide now. So it's
Wow.
it's a massive movement, and I didn't know any of this until I went to the show in San Diego. And I remember sitting there, and it was a super California show. I'm from the East Coast. I'm from Boston originally, so I still see San Diego as like this is so California sometimes. And the other thing is that they pick unique venues. So this venue was actually a brand new condo building where there was only like six people living in it, and they put the bands right next to this giant Olympic sized outdoor pool. It
Amazing.
was it was stunning. It was beautiful out. It was a full patio. Everybody had drinks. We're all sitting on blankets, and the bands were just incredible. They were set up like right next to a pool. I was really scared that they were going to fall in a couple of times. And
But they
they
didn't.
didn't. They didn't. But like at one point there was a New Orleans style brass band that was playing, and the
Wow.
trombone player actually sat in the lifeguard chair that like swung over the pool, and she's playing over the pool.
I couldn't imagine, having been in lockdown and I'm looking out the window now and it's a bit grey. I couldn't imagine anything nicer, like a better place to be than sat around the pool, listening to some music with a drink in my
With
hand.
all these people who
Perfect.
are just so happy. And I volunteered with So Far Sounds, running their social media, and eventually becoming an MC, where I was actually hosting and I was on stage and, really interacting with the audience, with the artists, doing interviews, all that. And it just really showed me that music is kind of the love of my life. And I needed to find a way to combine that with my marketing experience, which I also really love. I love marketing. It's just how do I pair those two things together? So that's kind of like the
Yeah.
origin story of that like aha moment where I knew I had to pursue it in some way. Yeah.
Fantastic. Fantastic. I think there's three big, pretty ballsy moves that you've made. One is to go at it alone,
Hmm.
work for yourself. Second is niche down. And the third is pick a niche that isn't exactly known for having money and big budgets, right? So
Yep.
how do you how do you make it work as a business when, if you're working with smaller artists or emerging artists or independent artists, the budgets aren't always
No.
there. How do you support people when there's not, loads of money for Facebook ads or, you know, how do you get started in that
Yeah,
world?
and to be completely transparent, after So Far Sounds, who I do work for now, I'm a part-time employee, so just full, putting that out there. But I waited probably a year, and I still was working corporate. I was working at Intuit at the time. So I was balancing Intuit, So Far Sounds, and then also slowly taking on clients. And this was, of course, pre COVID. So, the whole climate was different. But it took a lot of planning, it took a lot of saving, it took a lot of relationship building. Weekends were just dedicated to So Far Sounds or going to shows, being the person on the ground for these bands who need to make content, but maybe they don't really know how to. So it took a long time for me to get to this point and really pursue the format of the business that I thought could be sustainable. And even now with all of COVID and how much has changed within the industry, which I know you know about, John, I have other sources of income. Definitely, I have other part-time jobs. I have other clients that aren't in the industry, but I do still have a really strong roster of bands, and we're making it work because right now is not forever. Things are going to change, and it's just kind of really long-term planning and understanding
Yeah.
that this time where it is hard is not going to be forever.
I think that's really good advice actually for someone who is starting a freelance business or going out to do their own thing, that, you know, having a diverse income,
Yes.
it's not it's not a failure to have a couple of extra sources of income that are going to support you whilst you build up that thing that you really
Mhm.
do love and want to be doing. Because if you can't survive, you can't do what you love doing, can you?
Exactly.
So
And you can't support your musicians. And I really do look at my purpose as trying to support early stage and independent musicians. They need it. So if I can't support myself, I can't support them, and that just doesn't work.
yeah. What does your typical client look like? Is it a band? Is it a singer songwriter? Is it someone who's what stage are they at? Are they starting to play shows? No one's turning up, and they suddenly realize they have to do some marketing, or where do you come in to the
Yeah.
mix, and who do you work
Usually,
with?
I think on the artist side, so I mentioned before that I have artists and then I have music companies that I work with and consult with as well. So it's a nice mix
Okay.
there. But with the artists, I think So Far Sounds really lit this fire in me to really go after early stage, meaning that they're not, this isn't their first year in the music industry, but maybe it's their like second or third, where they have an idea of who they are and of their fan base, but they need somebody to help them really, kind of get a little tighter and add more rigor around that about who they are, what they want to say, and then what channels they want to use to do that. So that's usually when I come in. And really, I become one of the band members, which is, I'm not going to lie, it's a dream of mine to be like the band-aid in it. But yeah, I would say not like it, again, not beginner musicians, but maybe 2 to 3 years in the industry. And then in terms of organizations, working with companies that are at like a startup level or they're really trying to do new things in the space and also give back to artists and help make their lives easier so they can focus on the actual music making, and myself and maybe a team of others can help with the business side of the music business.
Like, are you helping to get people into shows or virtual shows as they are
Yeah.
probably now? Or are you trying to sell records or build up an audience for streaming? Like, what are I guess, like, the objectives and the outcomes that you're helping
It
people
really
achieve?
depends. I mean, one of my bands that I'm working with now, they were very dependent on live shows. They were very localized. So they're here in San Diego and they're very local in the local scene, and that's like where their people are. And we really use the live shows to drive a lot of content. So really promoting the heck out of it. They would perform with other bands, so a lot of cross collab opportunities, which is always great. And then having a photographer on site, I would be in the audience, I'd be live doing things on social, and then using that content after the show for videos, for even booking, to help with booking later, to get it on the website. So that's one example. But then for another client of mine, they really needed help with promoting singles because they were in a big promotion year this year, which is tough, of releasing a new album. So they were much more focused on the single release schedule and, the social media and also press outreach part of that. And that's where I came in to help. So it really depends on where the artist is and also what their community of fans looks like. But yeah, I mean, there's so many ways you can use marketing to help with those goals.
In terms of the bigger industry picture, like, if you rewound 20 years, it's like being on another planet, really, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Because just totally different industry in terms of how the money's generated, the model, and
Mhm.
everything behind it. I think on one hand that's great because there's more opportunity now for a new or independent artist to promote themselves, build an audience, get their music out there, it's so much easier to do that now, whereas 20 years ago, you'd have to book a studio, you'd have to get a load of CDs printed up. It
Mhm.
was tough. Like there was a lot of work involved. Whereas now, I think that process is a bit more fluid. The flip side, I think, is that you can easily get
Yes.
swallowed up, like because everyone's out there trying to do it. Well, not everyone, but it's a busy space, right? So, what's your take on it? Like, do you think where we are, or where we are in the world in terms of the music industry, is it good or
That's
bad?
a really good question. I think I always tell my clients, we might not have a major label budget to do things, but that doesn't mean that we don't watch major artists and what they're doing and then take what they're doing and the risks they might have the resources to take, right? And then flipping it or taking pieces of it and applying it to us and what we're able to do. So, an example would be like, let's take Travis Scott, who had that like insane music concert experience in Fortnite in April, which like I wrote a whole blog post about it because I became obsessed. Um, I mean, what a creative way to insert yourself into a new community, right? Um,
Yeah,
but what I took from that is how can we start partnering with companies that maybe are a little bit out of the box to reach new fans, and how do we do that on our very small or maybe non-existent budget? And again, we're not trying to replicate, we're trying to benchmark in a way where we're taking inspiration and really focusing it on us and what we're able to do. So that would be my advice, is to look around at how musicians are embracing technology and how they're taking risks. And one, try to format it so that you can do it with your resources and what is available to you. But then two, see how, just try it out, get out there. I'm just a big fan of good, not perfect. You're going to make mistakes and you might, take some time to try to figure out TikTok, try to figure out Twitch, try to figure out all these new platforms that are really increasing with us all being at home, but just do it and you will get better at it and be able, be okay with maybe failing at first, but eventually you're going to be the pro.
yeah, definitely. Actually, the very first episode of this podcast, I don't know if you listened to it, but it was with a really good friend of mine called Steve Jones, who I used to play in a band with. He went on to has put together a band called Brother Strut, and they built the whole thing up through
Wow.
Facebook ads from scratch, not knowing anything about Facebook ads, from scratch to playing to, between 1 and 2,000 people a night, right? All off their own backs, all with Facebook ads. So I think you have to, that point on learning what the new
Hmm.
emerging platform is really important. As any
Yep.
sector, I think if you're starting out, you have to
Oh yeah,
jump on
and
these
you raise
things.
a good point too about consistency. I always try to just say like there's a testing phase, but then there's a commitment phase of trying new things. So you might try something and say this isn't for me. Like I don't feel passionate about it. I don't have the time for it. There's a million things. One of my bands, we tried live streaming and they weren't feeling it. They were not feeling it, and I said that's okay. We can try other pieces of content, but just be really real with yourself about consistency, because I think to your point, that consistency of showing up for your fan base again and again will build your core base online with a new platform.
Yeah, and results can be
Oh yeah.
slow to start with, can't they? You might be getting, right, we'll get 20 more people at a show, and then the next time it might be 30 more people, and then, but it builds up slowly. It's not an instant
No, because it's new.
success
And you have
type
to think
thing.
of it like it's a new thing that you're trying, which is admirable on its own, but it's not going to be like an overnight Travis Scott level thing. That's just a different level. It's different. It's not better. It's not worse. It's just different than some of these independent bands. So they just have to keep that in mind and have their expectations in a realistic way.
Yeah, definitely. And onto the topic of COVID, and you know that I imagine that's kind of knocked. Well, it's knocked live music for six. You know, you can't go out and perform anymore.
Hmm.
Really, really tough for anyone who's getting an income from live music, what are some of the things that you've seen work in terms of, you know, bands or artists still trying to perform? Has it been virtual events? Has it been just being active on social? Like how, like what's some good examples of
Yeah,
how
I
people
think
have
one of the things
reacted?
I've seen that's working really well for any stage of artist, whether major, independent, or early stage, is really pursuing collaborations. And I don't mean like brand partnership, like influencer marketing. I mean actually reaching out to other artists who are in your genre, or maybe your fan base overlaps, something like that, and really partnering online. So that could be, doing like an IG live together, doing like a Q&A, or writing a blog post. It could be anything, depending on what your creative jam is. But I've been finding that those partnerships are really, really great for just building fans while you're not able to be on a stage. And one of my favorite examples, and this
Yeah,
again is at the major stage, but it should be an inspiration for any musician, are the Verses series. Have you been watching those? Oh,
I
they're
haven't,
my
but tell
they're
me
just like
more.
one of my favorite things. So it was started by Timbaland and Swiss Beats through Instagram, where they basically have a versus. So it's a battle between like really OG, have a lot of hits artists. So they had Ludacris and Nelly. They had the one that is my favorite is Jill Scott and Erykah Badu, because they're just two legends in R&B that I've loved since I was little. And so they had this verses between them where they literally, like, I find sometimes they get combative, where it's like, I got more hits than you, or my songs are stronger than yours. But this one was actually so peaceful. They were just like rooting for each other and playing each other's big hits. And it was this very loving, peaceful jam sesh between them. And their streams of their songs, I think they jump by 300% after that.
Wow,
It's incredible to think of.
that's
And these are
amazing, isn't it?
legacy, iconic artists. I get that. But what I think that shows us is that coming together right now, when we're limited in touring and stage, that can be really powerful for that overlap, because obviously Erykah Badu, Jill Scott, they have a lot in common. They've even sung in the Roots. They have that song with the Roots, "You Got Me." They've both sung the female part when the other one can't do it. So I mean, there's so much overlap there, and it really shows awards for both of them.
Yeah,
So that's just a great
yeah,
inspiration example. And I think also the music community really needs each other. I think we really need to reach out and see how we can help each other at this time.
yeah, definitely. One of the things I enjoyed seeing quite a lot when um, the whole COVID thing kicked off was, did you see the Sting and the Roots on Zoom?
Yes, yes, I did.
That was great. That was
Oh,
pretty cool.
that was so awesome. And that was the other point I wanted to say too, is embracing the tech part. Because I've seen so many artists just kind of go out there and, use what they have, like what you're saying about the Zoom video with Sting and the Roots. One of my favorite artists, Tao and the Get Down, Stay Down, she made a Zoom music video, and it's like 6 boxes of people on a Zoom call, and they're all doing this choreographed dance together,
Great.
and it's beautiful, and none of them left their house to do it, but they just figured it out. So again, these are great examples. And I would say to people, what's working right now that I'm seeing are collaborations, and then embracing technology, and where we're at right now.
Amazing. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
it's there's some this type of situation breeds some really interesting creativity, I think.
it does. It's very challenging, but I'm seeing people rise to that challenge, and artists are the perfect people for that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Do you have any favorite stories from the work you've done with artists across different sizes or companies that you've worked with? Like, what are the highlights of you kind of working in marketing for music?
I have so many I could tell you, but I know this podcast isn't like 8 hours long. So I think one of my favorites, so the band in San Diego I've been talking about, they're actually a tribute band. They're a Rage Against the Machine tribute band in
Oh,
San Diego, and
fantastic.
they're amazing. like I gotta tell you, I'm a little bit biased because we work together, but they are so great live, right? And then when you take the live out of it, that's where we've been struggling a little bit with marketing content. So one of my favorite success stories from this period of time is we actually decided to build this like fantasy football bracket style game for followers of I think it was 10 different Rage songs, and we asked the community to vote every day on their favorites. And then it got down to like, the top two songs. And I got to tell you, Rage fans were just starting arguments. They were having these like debate style, making their case for why this one should be the number one. And Killing in the Name actually won, which is such a relevant song
Yeah,
for
yeah,
these
yeah,
times.
yeah,
But like that, just like it just felt really good, and it was something we could do. That was resourceful right now. So that's one of my favorite stories. And then I think for So Far Sounds, when we were having concerts and seeing each other, one of my favorite stories is we always have to make sure the bathroom situation at any of our venues is good, right? Because bathrooms, food, these like human necessities need to be on point for a show, or people get real upset. So I had to one time fight with like a venue, one of the venues we were in. It was just like an office building, and they only would allow us to open up one bathroom for people. And I went in there, and there was only two rolls of toilet paper. And I said, this will not work. And I had to just like fight for them to open a second bathroom and to get us more toilet paper. And it's one of my favorite things because I remember just walking back into the rehearsal space with like an armload of toilet paper, just feeling so victorious.
you've won.
I won, and everybody called me the toilet paper fairy for the rest of the day because I was just handing it out like Oprah. But yeah, things like that. For events, whether they're virtual or live, I always tell people the devil's in the details. You have to really get those details right, or the fan experience or the attendee experience will not be good.
Yeah, it sounds like So Far Sounds have got that pinned down with, you know, gigs around a swimming pool in the sunshine and yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
So to kind of wrap up, where can people find you and find out a little bit more about what you're up to?
Yeah, so my website is just AlisonClancy.work. Allison with one L. I'm not fancy. I just got the one L. And then on social, I'm underscore Allison Clancy underscore. And I actually have a newsletter called B-Sides where I write about music and tech happening every week. So we cover streaming, so live streaming, live shows. There's a COVID update. So I just try to kind of do a wrap up of all the tech movements that have been happening in the industry that week. So yeah, sign up for that as well.
Fantastic. Well, look, we'll put as many of those links in the show notes as we possibly can, so
Awesome.
everyone can check that out. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, John. This has been so much fun.